What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
This is episode 80 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. In Britain today, all policemen are commonly referred to as bobbies. Originally, though, they were known as peelers, in reference to one Sir Robert Peel. He lived from 1788 to 1850. Today, it is hard to believe that Britain in the 18th century did not have a professional police force. Scotland had established a number of police forces following the introduction of the City of Glasgow Police in 1800, and the Royal Irish Constabulary was established in 1822, in large part because of the Peace Preservation Act of 1814, which Peel was heavily involved with. However, London was sadly lacking in any form of protective presence and crime prevention for its people as we entered the 19th century. Following the success of the Royal Irish Constabulary, it became obvious that something similar was needed in London. So in 1829, Sir Robert Peel was Home Secretary in Lord Liverpool's Tory cabinet. The Metropolitan Police Act was passed, providing permanently appointed and paid constables to protect the capital as part of the Metropolitan Police Force. The first 1,000 of Peel's police, dressed in blue tailcoats and top hats, began to patrol the streets of London on 29 September 1829. The uniform was carefully selected to make the peelers look more like ordinary citizens rather than a red-coated soldier with a helmet. The peelers were issued with a wooden truncheon carried in a long pocket in the tail of their coat, a pair of handcuffs, and a wooden rattle to raise the alarm. By the 1880s, this rattle had been replaced by a whistle. To be a peeler, the rules were quite strict. You had to be aged 20 to 27, at least 5'7" tall, or near as possible, fit, literate, and have no history of any wrongdoings. These men became the model for the creation of all provincial forces, at first in London, in the London boroughs, and then into the countries. At first in the London boroughs, and then into the counties and towns after the passing of the County Police Act in 1839. An ironic point, however, the Lancashire town of Bury, birthplace of Robert Peel, was the only major town which elected not to have its own separate police force. The town remained part of the Lancashire Constabulary until 1974. Early Victorian police worked 7 days a week with only 5 days unpaid holiday a year, for which they received the grand sum of £1 per week. Their lives were strictly controlled. They were not allowed to vote in elections and required permission to get married and even to share a meal with a civilian. To allay the public's suspicion of being spied on, officers were required to wear their uniforms both on and off duty. In spite of the huge success of the Bobbies, Peel was not a well-liked man. Queen Victoria is said to have found him a cold, unfeeling, disagreeable man. They had many personal conflicts over the years, and when he spoke against awarding her darling Prince Albert an annual income of £50,000, he did little to endear himself to the Queen. When Peel was Prime Minister, he and the Queen had a further disagreement over her ladies of the bedchamber. Peel insisted that she accepted some Tory ladies in preference to her Whig ladies. Although Peel was a skillful politician, he had few social graces and had a preserved, off-putting manner. After a long and distinguished career, Sir Robert came to an unfortunate end. He was thrown from his horse while riding on Constitution Hill in London on 29 June 1850 and died 3 days later. His legacy remains, however, as long as the British bobbies patrol the streets and keep the population safe from wrongdoers and help lost tourists find their way back to the comfort of their hotels, of course. Now, in 1829, Sir Robert Peel established the London Metropolitan Police Force, like we said. He became known as the father of modern policing, and his commissioners established a list of policing principles that remain as crucial and urgent today as they were 2 centuries ago. They contain 3 core ideas and 9 principles. And what I'm going to talk about today is those 9 principles. And I'm not going to do this alone. I've got somebody with me to talk about those principles with me. And you may be familiar with this gentleman because I've talked about him before on the show. You may recall, as I was having a conversation, that when I talk about what your why and what your reason for doing what you do is, I brought up this story about an officer who, when he did a ride along with me, we were talking about when you've got to come up with the reason that you're doing this. When they ask you that question, why do you want to be a police officer? You have to have more than just that. Well, I want to help people, and I want to be, I want to be a nice guy, or I want to carry a gun, I want to drive fast. That sort of stuff, that's not going to fly. That's not going to be long lasting. It's not going to have any longevity. There's no intrinsic value in that. But I mentioned this to this gentleman when he finally became a police officer. Years later, he then said to me, he pulled me off to the side and said, you asked me this question, and there is a time when you don't want to do this anymore, when you're frustrated with people or whatever the case may be. And at what point do you say, okay, I'm doing it because of X, Y, Z, or I'm doing it for this reason? And he didn't tell me that day what that was, but he did tell me that he maintains his why because sometimes you just get frustrated with this job. Sometimes you just get to that point. So when I brought that up with a previous guest, they asked, well, did he say what it was? What was his why? And I said he never told me. I've never pushed the issue. Sometimes some of those things are just what somebody has inside them, and they like to hold that to close to their chest. But he is here with us today. He may or may not answer that question. That is completely up to him, and I'm not going to push the issue again. However, without any further prattling on my part, we're going to welcome Officer Brooks. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, and I will answer that question. I love that question. I think it's one of the most crucial questions you can ask yourself on a day-to-day basis, both as a police officer or someone who wants to be a police officer.
All right. Well, answer away.
Okay. Well, we are talking about Peel's principles of policing, and by and large, the principles dictate that you are working in cooperation with the public, and that you secure their trust and their favor, and that they are working on your behalf as well, because you have the same goal, which is to live in a safe community, which is to maintain a safe community. And those principles in large part contribute to my why. And for quite a while now, I've been asking myself, why am I doing this job? Both in a good way and both in a, why am I doing this job? And the answer seems to have evolved over the years, but by and large, I think it stays within the realm of existing in the dichotomy of trying to be a more effective communicator with the public, learn to better myself and challenge myself through the depths of the despair, the violence, the depravity that we deal with on a daily basis, and let those things, those dark, dark places, allow me to enjoy the light even more. And I don't know if that makes sense, but the best way that I can describe it was during an incident. It was a suicide that I went to, and me and another officer responded. We both knew exactly what was on the other side of the trailer door, which was a dead body that had probably been dead for quite some time. What we didn't know was that it was a guy that lived alone, and he had turned on 3 heaters right before he had killed himself, and he had been dead for probably a week. And when we opened the door, the stench and all the corresponding decay that comes along with being dead for a week in front of heaters presented itself. And this trailer was dingy. It was melted into the ground, and so was he. And I found the bullet that had passed through his head, gone through 2 cabinet walls, through a package of light bulbs, and folded itself up into or it was final resting place was in a folded set of towels. And it's weird, those little details that you notice and that you pay attention to.
Right.
But I pull out the slug from the towels and held it in my hand there. And well, it dawned on me, this is the first time I've held a bullet that's passed through a man's head. And, it's those funny little things. You don't realize kind of how disconnected you are from the situation you're in when that's what you're noticing. And that's kind of the funny little thing that pops up when you're standing in someone's death scene. And so you get away from that. And I live probably a mile away from where this occurred. Mm-hmm. I get off shift and I go home, and my at the time 3-year-old daughter runs into my arms and just, "Daddy's home," and the absolute joy. And so that dichotomy of, I wouldn't enjoy that hug from my daughter quite as much had I not been in that depth of despair experienced by the guy prior to killing himself.
Right.
So you step into these little caves and valleys of despair and death and abject tragedy and sometimes torture and things like that. And then you get to experience things like giving your daughter a hug. And for me, that really drives me. That really keeps me going. And you can get really sucked into the negativity of this job. And most people exist right in the center of despair and joy. And mm-hmm. their forays into either of those things are fairly limited. Someone's bad day might be that their coffee drink was too warm or too cold, or, they burnt their tongue on their coffee, something like that.
Right.
And their good part might be they get a 3% bonus bump at work, and I'm not knocking those things. If that's your range of despair and joy, then that's okay.
Sure.
That's what you've experienced. That's not a bad thing. But if your experience of bad that day was holding someone as they died, looked at you, wanting you to help them, and there's nothing you could do, mm-hmm. and then getting to go home and be with your family again, those are pretty big ranges of joy and despair. And so for me, that's my why, is that constant fluctuation and letting one inform the other, letting those two polarized opposites inform each other. And I absolutely love that.
Right. Without the light, you don't know the dark. Without the dark, you don't know the light.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that is a fantastic answer to that question. And you can't grasp that unless that is yours. And for me to be able to try to explain that, I wouldn't have been able to had you explained that to me before. And I don't think we've had the opportunity to go into a conversation like that previously, because I mean, there's something about this setting that makes that more available to us. But
probably that we both don't have pants on is
stop it. Because we're wearing shorts.
I'm just kidding. Ken has pants on.
That's right. It's the Zoom world, but we're not on Zoom, so it's cool. Who is Brooke? We're going to get just a little bit of who is Officer Brooks, this guy that looks at the light and the dark. Just give us a quick little synopsis of who you are and what's your deal, man?
Yeah. Well, I read the Bible most mornings, so if that'll tell you something, then cool. I've got 3 kids, and first and foremost, I think that I'm a family man, and I think that that's something that gets lost in the police world. Is that first and foremost, I'm a family man.
Yeah.
I go to work as a police officer. That's not who I am. I'm a woodworker. I used to spend more time, but I do spend some time out in my shop building things. Most of my stuff these days is, house projects and not things that I enjoy as much, but, woodworking is what keeps me sane. I used to coach college soccer, and I draw a lot of parallels, in the 2 disciplines that I train in, between coaching and firearms and de-escalation. Kind of disjointed here. I guess I should start more at the beginning. I'm from a small town in Davis, or near Sacramento, called Davis. Very academic, very agricultural town. worked on a cattle farm growing up a little bit with a buddy of mine. Ended up playing soccer in college and did okay for myself there. Graduated, and I thought I was going to be a professional soccer player, and that was the first time that I was really rattled, because I had it pretty smooth going all the way through soccer, and then I was good at in high school, and I was real good in college, and then you get to the professional level and you have this sinking feeling in your chest, and you go, I'm not that good. There's a lot of people that are better than me, and I'm just not that good. So that kind of rattled me for a long time, that sense that what I wanted to do and my sense of who I was really screwed me up, quite frankly. It was kind of a man without a purpose, if you will. There was I had lost my why. I had lost my why. My reason for really getting up and being motivated to do something was gone. And so that was kind of my first foray into finding that I had a gap in my life and everything. And quite honestly, I met my wife, my now wife, soon after that. And it's been a slow progression of reading the Bible every morning, because that's not something that I grew up with or something that I did. And so that really helped fill that void that was missing. And it really helped me with my why, on a day-to-day basis. Right. But yeah, I mean, I guess to answer your question, that's mostly who I am. I would say first and foremost, I'm a guy that gets up and reads the Bible most mornings, and I'm a family man.
That's good.
That goes to work sometimes as a police officer.
And sometimes you're a coach, and sometimes you're a trainer, sometimes you're a, whatever, but that's, if you know your central person, I mean, I think that gives you more credibility for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you understand how to develop your why a little bit better.
Yeah.
Saying the first day that we ever met each other, we went on a suicide together.
Yeah, that's true.
And I made you sit in the car, and I think you were in there for 2 hours or something like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
While I went and did it, but it was one of those things that we, I guess we kind of share that sort of deal. It's not like, and I think you still had a pretty good ride along that one, even though that one was how it.
Well, I think that you can't get on much of a better ride along than that, because talk about a test of do you want to be here? Yeah. And if I remember correctly, and I do, I'm saying that rhetorically, it was a kid that had killed himself, and then you did the death notification straight after that,
right?
Both of which I stayed in the car for. But as I recall, the neighbors, when you told the mom, called in a disturbance because of her screaming and her anguish,
right?
And I have since done that exact same death notification to a mom, and you really got to have a why. You really got to have a why to show up the next day after you tell a mom you're never going to see your kid again.
Yeah.
Especially as a parent.
Yeah. And I don't know if there is a comparable sound that you hear when a mom has that, and it's that blood curdling scream or whatever. It's the same. I've heard it multiple times, and I'm sure you have too. And anybody else that listens to this that has done these, there's something guttural about that scream that they've probably never made that sound before in their life, and they never will. It's a specific sound that a mother makes.
Yeah.
And it's mothers, and I've heard it multiple times, that it's, like I said, incomparable.
It's rattling.
Yeah.
Rattling.
It's so deep. It's so from a pit of despair that you can't even, movies couldn't redo it.
Right.
Nothing can redo that. It's absolutely horrible, and it's not something you'd wish on your worst enemy.
No.
So we're going to kind of veer away from the darkness for a little bit.
That's okay. Let's go foray into the light.
Let's go, because without the dark, we don't know the light.
Yeah,
so let's go ahead and so we want to talk a little bit about Peele's principles, and the reason I asked you to come on and talk about this is because I know you're a student of this. I know you and I've had some deep conversations about this very topic. However, we're going to go over the 9 principles that I talked about. You guys know who Robert Peel is now, and we're just going to go right into those 9 principles, and we're going to kind of do an in-depth conversation about it. You may have heard me talk about these previously with Dave Smith, Buck Savage. He and I talked about it a little bit. Several other guests have talked about it. However, we're going to go into depth today, and I think it's actually really it's really good to know these things, because they, like we said, it is the principles of modern policing and what police go through, and the mindset. I think something that sets the mindset of an officer. Not everyone has this same mindset. However, if they can kind of go off these principles and say, okay, I'm doing this, this is a reason we do X, Y, Z, then we can have an idea of how it is that we police. So, number 1 is to prevent crime and disorder as an alternative to their repression by military force and severity of legal punishment.
Yeah. And I think I want to kind of tack on to what you said as we jump into these, that I think it's an absolute shame that you have to become a police officer to learn these. They don't
Agreed.
teach these until academy. This should be taught in schools.
And sometimes these aren't even taught in the academy.
Right.
It's something that a police officer has to go learn on their own, because even departments don't sit there and have these tacked on the wall or something.
And one of the reasons I jumped at the opportunity to talk to you about these is because this is something the public has to know, because the public is actually, quite frankly, the larger part of these principles.
Agreed. So
to prevent crime and disorder is an alternative to their repression by military force and severity of legal punishment. So what we're talking about here is, in essence, that a public will understand that law enforcement presence is a favorable alternative to the heavy-handedness of, say, martial law, or the punishments that you might find in a totalitarian state, where you do the wrong thing, you say the wrong thing, and guess what? The thugs are kicking in your doors at night, and you are gone, not for a couple days in jail, but for good. You're off to the gulags. You're off to the
right.
And so, in a free society, the kind of the measure of a free society is how you treat your criminals. And what I mean by that is, are criminals' rights protected? And I know it sounds silly for a cop to say, but really, truly, we live in a great society that these principles inform. And so to prevent crime and disorder as an alternative to the repression by military force and severity of legal punishment is, if we can prevent crime from happening, then we are not taking away the rights of the criminals, which, when you arrest someone, you are depriving them of freedom of movement. You're depriving them of, they can't go see a movie now. They can't go back to their family now.
They can't just go take for a walk in the park.
Right. And what we, I think, lose in our minds is the effect that has on a criminal's family and the people that are in their lives. Mm-hmm. And so this severity of punishment, the last part, severity of legal punishment, is pretty far reaching. If you take a father to jail, even for a night, and he doesn't go home to his family, I'm not saying that's wrong. Sometimes people have to be punished, but if we can prevent him from committing the crime, then his family's never deprived of his presence. And so, it's a favorable to prevent crime from happening rather than to punish crime after it's happened, because the far-reaching consequences of that punishment, if that makes sense.
Right. There's something that I talk about when I have new recruits, and I'm sure you do the same thing, or something similar, but I'll talk about, I say, okay, what are we doing? And this was explained to me a long time ago by one of my trainers. What are we doing when we actually arrest somebody? And they're like, we're taking them to jail. I said, no, more in depth than that. We are depriving them of liberty. Mm-hmm. You have freedom. Growing up in this country, we've always said, hey, it's a free country. I can say what I want. I can do what I want. You're right. It is a free country. And you see it on TV and everything else where somebody says it's a free country. You're right. It is a free country. There's a point where you get that freedom taken away from you. So you're taking liberty, you're taking that freedom from somebody and not letting them do that, like we talked about. Just that walk in the park or go to the movie or whatever. Now, one step further, we have to go put them somewhere. And as I talk to little kids, I explain, people, it's not bad people. We just have time out. It's just time out for adults. And basically, that's what jail is.
Right.
And they get that concept because they understand, because everything that we do as far as enforcement of the law is the same thing that you learned in kindergarten. You don't take what's not yours. You don't hurt people. You don't say things you shouldn't say. You don't break things. It's just that simple,
right.
So the same rules apply at kindergarten as we do as adults. So you get time out if you do those things, right? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, that's the same thing happens to adults. We're taking that liberty away. Now, what do we do? What are we required to do with that liberty? We have to explain why us as a law enforcement officer took this person's liberty. There's more to it. I can't just say, like you see the funny meme with the dog, saw man, bit same, or something like that, right? It doesn't work that way. You have to explain in detail why it is you deprive them of the liberty. So then you have to have that, and we do that in a report. And then we have to have that within a specific set of time frames. That we have to get that to the authorities.
Right.
Yes, we are the authorities. The police are the authorities, but then you have to put that into a certain amount of time frame that you have to get that to somebody, a judge, a lawyer. It has to go before a magistrate.
Right.
Like if we're going to have talk, we're going to have old talk now.
Sure.
Right. Take it before the magistrate and say, hey, I deprived him of liberty because of this reason here. Right. This is it. And then it has to do that within a certain amount of time. If it's not, then we're deprived. Then that's not you don't have the right to a speedy trial. That's the idea, right? And,
due process.
And all that stuff that we talked about back in the 1700s.
Yeah.
That we didn't have back then because of the way that the King George, said that American colonials didn't deserve that. We don't have that right. So the fact that we have that and the way we do it is explained in the Constitution that we have to do it that way. And so so it's more than just, hey, I'm just going to take this away from you. And it's a lot different than if martial law, like you said, were to come into play and say, hey, your house is now ours. We need to quarter some troops.
Right. Hey, there's a piece of paper that prevents that. Hey, excuse me. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's really important. You see examples of American society devolving into chaos, right? Devolving into chaos, and more strict measures needing to be enforced. I mean, you take the Portland riots that happened over the last couple of years, examples where, is it favorable for the citizens to have the Portland riot team, dispersing crowds with tear gas, foam batons, and force? No, it's not favorable.
Well,
that's not a favorable alternative to the citizens saying, you know what, we don't want to live in chaos. We don't want to have our shop fronts smashed out and broken in. So we're going to work with the authorities to prevent that from happening. Right. And hopefully you don't generate too many hate emails on that comment, but, the right to peaceably assemble is very important. First Amendment, it's very important. When it devolves into smashing storefronts, now you have to have a more heavy-handed authority come in when there's mass chaos and crowds and people doing mass crimes that are costing millions of dollars and people are getting murdered. And, it's more favorable to live in a society that works with the police and prevents crime from happening.
Right. I'm guilty of saying, I think protests are my least favorite thing to do in this job. And I'll say it time and again. However, I will take a, air quotes, peaceful protest, and I mean that, where people are just, heck no, we won't go, or whatever. Sure. I said heck, but it is what it is. And they're just in front of the courthouse with a sign, and they're just walking back and forth.
Right.
No on or yes on abortion, or no on abortion, or whatever you want, whatever your feeling is.
Sure.
You guys are cool. And at some point you decide, hey, we're calling it a day. We need to go back home to our families. Okay, great. Day's over. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Hey, First Amendment all the way.
Thank God we can disagree peaceably.
Right.
Thank God. Truly, I mean that.
I agree.
It's one of the greatest things in this country is that we can have a conversation and not agree, and that's okay.
And then on the adverse side, though, it starts ramping up to, okay, hey, we're going to start doing more. We're going to freeze water bottles and start throwing at cars as they pass by. Or we're going to start smashing windows so we can get the police over here so we can go do something over here to these people that we disagree with. And then it starts devolving into this thing that nobody wants except for a certain number of people.
Sure.
And those are the people who, if we can just have them not do that in the first place, we're better off, which is that crime prevention portion that we talked about.
And you have to do that with cooperation society, because the reality is, however big your town is, 8 beat cops, 40 beat cops are going to be vastly outnumbered by orders of about 10,000 persons per one citizen.
Correct.
And so you cannot control 10,000 people as one cop. So you have to have their cooperation, which is what these principles are about.
Right. And so you go back into that first one, like we talked about, that alternative to their military repression. And so instead of having troops marching up and down the streets at all hours, all the time, and like, oh, there's another
Right.
You hear that moving down the street. How safe do you really feel? How free do you really feel? Especially when curfews start getting put in, or like you said, martial law starts becoming an issue. And so we're not free. So that's on one end of it. The other end is what we had up in Seattle with the CHOP or Chaz or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And that's the totally opposite of it.
Right.
We don't have anything. Hey, we don't want no police, and we don't want this, and we're free, and people start dying, and disease starts becoming rampant.
They had their own police force that promptly killed an unarmed black man. When I say police in air quotes here, a bunch of guys said, "We are the police," and then they promptly killed an unarmed black man. And like, oh, okay. I guess policing isn't as easy as we thought it was. Maybe there's a little more to it than just calling yourself the police.
Right. But if you notice, all of those, they had to have some kind of authority to say this is the right way and this is the wrong way. It doesn't matter. Whatever society you want to devolve into, there's still going to be some sergeant at arms, or you're still going to have some kind of somebody saying, hey, this is how we're going to enforce what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. And Dave Grossman actually mentions that in his books, where he talks about, if you're developing a society from scratch and you're rewriting one, the first thing you need to have is some kind of one of the first things you need to have is some kind of control, some kind of authority to say this is the right way and this is the wrong way. This is what's going to happen, and these are the people that are going to enforce that way. Everybody's cool, but if you step out of line, this is what's going to happen. And when
it's best to do that with the people's approval. Right. Otherwise, you're in a totalitarian state, or you're in a Lord of the Flies situation where it's, I'm 6'2", 260 pounds. Who's going to win in the fight between me and that person that's, 5'1" and 110 pounds? Right. And now it's just a rule of the jungle, survival of the fittest. Right. And so the cooperation of the people and a common agreement as to what the rules of society are is best, because then when you go as the police to enforce those laws, there's a common agreement in place and people aren't fighting you. They understand that stealing is wrong. They understand that hurting someone unjustly is wrong. Right. They understand that, punching someone in the face is going to yield potentially them getting punched in the face. Right. Yeah. Or the whole, I mean, you look at like Chicago, look at all these videos going out in Chicago or San Francisco or whatever, where people are just, there's hordes of people are going in the stores and looting these stores. And so, Walgreens or whomever is just shutting down because nobody's there stopping them. Right. And I think that speaks to the second principle. Well, if that's the case, let's go right into number 2 then. And that is to recognize always that the power of the police to fulfill their functions and duties is dependent on public approval of their existence, actions, and behavior, and on their ability to secure and maintain public respect. And I think that that's what has happened in those large cities, and whether that's on the part of police not doing their job the right way, or whether that's on the perceptions that have been portrayed through carefully selected body cameras, being replayed and replayed and replayed in a disproportionate numbers to the body cameras of the cops, helping the homeless man out of the gutter, giving him water, and then trying to get him, to a shelter or whatever the case may be. You have these cities that have the police forces have lost support and lost favor from the citizens. Mm-hmm. And so sort of radical measures are taken or laws are passed or, the rules are being changed without much thought. And now you have a police force that is not capable or unwilling, in some cases to try to help the citizens or prevent crime from happening.
Right.
We'll respond when it happens because our efforts to prevent crime from happening, and I use Portland as an example a lot because it's fairly, it's a polarizing example.
Prevalent. Yeah.
Yeah. And they had a team of guys that was going after stolen guns because you may not believe this, but a lot of murders are committed with stolen guns.
What?
And so when a firearm would get stolen, they had this team of guys that would immediately go into action and start to track that firearm down and try to figure out who stole it and recover it. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of that link in the chain that was like, okay, we could respond to a murder or we could go after that stolen firearm right after it's stolen. And when they disbanded that team for the reasons that
Portland does whatever they do.
Right. Murders went through the roof. And it was an example of, well, we think that, this aspect of policing is disproportionately affecting this community. So we're just going to get rid of this aspect of policing. And then murders went through the roof in that community.
And then they start saying, well, how come murders are so high now?
Why aren't the police doing their job? Why aren't they stopping these murders from happening? And I think that that's why I say it's so important that we should be teaching these principles in school. We should be teaching these principles because it's foundational to
society.
It's foundational to work in harmony with the police force. And you don't have to agree with everything the police do. You don't have to agree with that. But, and then we as police officers have to recognize that small steps out of line can have pretty massive ramifications.
Right. And I always talked about, and this is, I think somebody's brought this up to me. If you take care of the little things, you don't have to deal with the big things because the big things never become a thing. Right.
And I'm going to give you a story, and I think you'll start laughing at as soon as you hear the part of this story that's relevant. You'll start laughing at this. But I'm going to give you two stories. One of them kind of an example of how I did something that I thought was right. And I'm not tooting my horn here, but generally speaking, this is how I operate. Generally speaking, I'm pretty good. The other story is an example from me of the abject opposite, or the polar opposite of that, and abject, just terrible policing. And I think that these are an example of two small interactions that really encapsulate this, that me recognizing that my power only exists if the citizens are okay with my actions. Mm-hmm. So, I had it was a gal that did a robbery. And what I mean by that is she stole something from a store and then used physical force to overcome the resistance of a loss prevention officer. So we're talking about a robbery 3, kind of the lowest level of robbery, not like with a gun or a knife. She just tried to do a shoplift and then fought with the loss prevention as she was leaving.
Right.
So I arrest her and I take her to jail, and she is just MFing me and everything you can think of. Mm-hmm. I mean, the worst things that you can think of. I've unlawfully arrested her. She can't believe I'm doing this to her. And she's in the throes of addiction. She's going through, let's just say, a rough time.
Right.
I get to jail and I open the door, and she's still MFing me and saying all these things. And I say to her, may I pray for you? Uh-huh. I just tell her, hey, may I pray for you? Right. And I say this prayer and I just pray over her, and it changes her right there on the spot. You can see she wasn't expecting it. And so she goes to jail 18 months later exactly. And I know this for a fact. 18 months later exactly, I respond to a crash on 6th Street, 7th Street, sorry. And, this kind of little bit heavier set woman walks up to me that's involved in this crash. And she's got this sort of cheeky smile on her face. And she looks at me and she says, do you know who I am? I said, no. She goes, you arrested me exactly 18 months ago, and you prayed for me in the Sally Port, and I have been sober since that day. In fact, I was going to my 18-month sobriety meeting when I got in this crash.
Wow.
And she gives me this big hug, and I give her a hug, and I'm like, oh, I got something in my eye. Someone's cutting onions around here, and it's one of those moments where it's like a very, very little interaction. And I could have just lodged her. I could have just taken her to the jail and thrown her in jail. And hey,
don't do it again. You're on the cops.
You're a piece of crap because you stole something, as opposed to being like, no, you have more in you.
Right.
You did this one bad thing that I'm gonna condemn the action, but I'm not gonna condemn the person because I don't know what they're going through, and that's a really small example of a very small interaction, a very small piece of time that seemed to have a lasting effect on someone. And so the other one I'm going to give you is the polar opposite of that. And I walk up on this guy who's in the middle of a drug deal. Clearly weighing out doses. He's got several baggies. I mean, the full 9 yards. Anything you can think of that would indicate this is a drug dealer currently selling drugs right there in his lap. So I end up hooking him up. And obviously he's in the throes of addiction as well. Very similar circumstances to this other gal.
Right.
Similar levels of crime, drug dealing and robbery are both felony crimes.
And why was she robbing? Because she was in the throes of addiction.
Right.
It's all drug related. Yes.
And why is he selling drugs? Because he's in the throes of addiction. That's how he makes his money.
Right.
So I arrest him, and then he starts doing the song and dance of, oh, I'm overdosing. I swallowed heroin and to prevent you from getting me for that heroin. He didn't, because I surprised him. I walked up on him. There's no opportunity for him to swallow anything. So I knew that he was lying. And so you get this talk about frustration in the job. I have to give him medical attention. I have to take him to the hospital. So I take him to the hospital, and we're talking, and he's, same thing. MFing me, telling me all of the things that I'm doing wrong. And, you're depriving me of going home. I was just trying to get home to my kids. I was just, but he gets to me,
Right.
He gets to me.
Yeah.
Especially the whole, you're depriving me of being with my kids, as opposed to, you were selling drugs in a parking lot. You were selling poison to people in a parking lot, and,
Sure.
And so I get so mad at him, especially after he starts doing the song and dance about I'm depriving him of his kids.
Right.
It's my fault. And so they're handcuffed to the hospital bed. We're waiting for the doctor. And I say to him, I lean in and I say, it's hard for me to say because I'm so not proud of this, but I say, you know what? The best thing you could do would actually be to overdose and die. That's the best thing you could do for your kids.
Right.
And as soon as I said those words, man, they talk about in the Bible, it's not what goes in your mouth that makes you unclean. It's what comes out of your mouth that makes you unclean. Yeah. And talk about feeling like just a low piece of crap. Yeah. And in that moment, I realized how badly I had failed. Not only,
because you can't take it back.
No, you can't take that back. And what a god awful thing to say from one father to another.
Right.
You don't get any worse than that.
Right.
Depriving those kids of their father and saying that and putting that into words. I mean, it's just the worst thing you can do as a person, in my opinion, let alone a police officer that's entrusted to Rule 2 or Principle 2, gain his approval. And so you have two situations that are very similar where I took away someone's freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I conducted myself left a lasting impression on both of those people.
Yeah.
And the part that I say that you'll laugh at is the next day an officer went and took this guy to jail. Right. And he called me and said, hey, I got that guy in the back of my car. And I said, hey, can you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Will you turn around? Will you tell him I'm so sorry for what I said? And I don't know if that officer ever knew that was what was said, but that's what was said.
He probably just said, hey, he said sorry for whatever he said last night. I don't know.
Right.
He probably just totally brushed it off the officer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I ever get a chance to meet with that particular drug dealer again, no matter the circumstances, I will apologize.
Yeah.
And because that isn't something that you say to another man, to another father, let alone as a police officer in a position of power. And so that's sort of those examples of gaining the public's favor and having them think of you in a favorable light after taking their freedom versus the polar opposite of that.
Yeah, it's that public respect, that maintaining that public respect. Because if they don't respect us, I mean, and you can see this in Chicago or New York or wherever, these big cities, where people they're pouring water on cops, or they're bashing their cars,
right,
or they don't respect when they just say, hey. No, I mean, there's criminals that will do whatever they do when you get up there and they're pushing the issue and they're running from the cops. They're not doing what we tell them to do.
That is a very, very small portion of the criminals. Most of the criminals, I mean, 99 out of 100. Hey, turn around. You got a warrant for your arrest. Turn around. Put your hands behind your back. Okay,
man.
Sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you have a conversation about what's going on in their life when you're going to the jail and you're building a rapport with them. And the funny thing that people don't really understand is the people that we have the most frequent contact with, those frequent flyers that we arrest, 40 times a year, whatever the case may be, we generally have a pretty good relationship with them.
Yeah, we know them by sight. And this goes for big cities. It goes for across the board, across the country, around the world. They know the same ones. Oh, that's Joe Smith or whatever the case may be. And they're able to say, with a certain amount of certainty, hang on a second. I'll be right there. Let me talk to him.
Yeah.
And if he's just blowing up, he's just getting loud, obnoxious, and whatever. That one guy that's built a relationship or built a rapport with him.
Yeah.
Say, hey man, remember we talked about this before, and I know, I just having a rough time. Can you do me a favor? We got to deal with this warrant or whatever we got to do, and let's call it good. When you get out, tell you what I'm going to do. I will, and there's officers that do this all the time.
Yeah.
Hey, when you get out, get a hold of me. And I'll make sure that you have, something to eat, or you have a coat because it's starting to get cold.
Right.
And there are officers that will go out and they'll purchase a jacket or they'll get a meal and they get nothing in return. There's no hey, the bosses saw what you did and they want to give you a kudos or whatever at work. But it doesn't happen because it becomes not known.
Right. And that's also, you get into a situation where you are outnumbered, and it's not necessarily a hostile situation, but you're down at this park that's got a lot of transients, and you're dealing with a guy with a warrant, and he starts to get out of line, and then another guy steps in and says, "Hey, dude, knock it off." It's, Brooks is cool. Brooks is cool. Don't mess with Brooks. He's cool. He's going to be fair. And I use that a lot because a lot of them know me. Generally speaking, as someone who treats them with respect and dignity. And when you do that on a continual basis, even with the criminals, they're going to have your back. They're going to say, you arrested me last time and you were pretty cool and fair. You treated me with respect despite the fact that I did something wrong. And again, it speaks to that principle number 2, that your existence depends on the criminal's approval too. Right.
And I don't think that there's a large number of citizens who don't have contact with the police, they never have contact with the police. They rarely ever deal with criminal element. They go to the store, they get their groceries, they take it home, they put it away, they go pick up their kids from soccer, school, or whatever, and then they go out to dinner and they go to the movies. They never have. And then when there is some kind of something comes on and they're like, wow, there's, the police are here for whatever reason. Hey, I got in a car crash and the police are here, and they're just like, hey, Mr. Officer, because they don't have this interaction all the time.
Right.
And there's that general public who don't have that interaction, don't have issues or problems or whatever. And when they do see what the police are doing, they're like, hey, how come he's being so heavy handed with this guy?
Right.
Probably because it's the 100th time that he's dealt with this guy. And
this guy's tried to punch me 4 times in the face,
right before he's pulled out a knife last time or whatever the case is.
Sure.
This is why he's being, because this is the first time you've seen it. Doesn't mean the first time that these two are having an interaction.
And that's where most of the complaints get generated. To be quite honest, is you see these citizens that have 1 or 2 interactions with a cop, and it's bad. And I'm not discounting that. We have a level of professionalism that we're expected to maintain, but you rarely see these hardened criminals that we deal with all the time complaining about the way they were treated. Even when you have to be heavy handed because they've had, 80 interactions with the cops in the last 2 years. And they know that when they turn on the cops and try to punch a cop or whatever, they know what's coming. They know that there's going to be force used to prevent them from hurting the cops. Mm-hmm. And they're not dumb. They understand how the world works.
Right.
But then you have these citizens where you have a slightly a slightly crappy tone in your voice because this is, the third bike that's been stolen that was unsecured and unlocked in the front yard, and you just came from a dead kid investigation, and now this person wants to tell you that it's your fault that their bike got stolen because there's not enough cops or whatever the case may be.
You should have been in my neighborhood.
Right.
Yes, you're right.
And that's where the complaints are generated, which is kind of funny. It's ironic that the people that we deal with the most, generally speaking, are not the ones that are complaining.
Yeah, and it's just weird. So there's this weird dichotomy because it's a lack of understanding or it's a lack of knowledge, and I think that's everything. When you were afraid, it's because as soon as you find out a bit of information, that fear goes away. When you're stressed out, as soon as you get a little bit of information, okay, that stress kind of goes away because you see something's progressing through it to get to the other side of it.
Right.
When you don't see what's happening, why this officer had a bad tone or why this officer had a whatever it is that they did, you don't see that. And then so when you make that complaint, and then the bosses come down and say, hey, how come you were, this person said you did this? I did. Because I just came from XYZ. I was at this thing. And all of a sudden they get it. And so then the citizens, well, what did you do to that? I want to, did you have a word with him? Why is he still on the beat or whatever?
Right.
Well, he's not a bad guy. He did this one bad thing or he said it in a way that you don't necessarily approve of.
Right.
But it's not illegal. It's not against policy. It's not. And okay, we'll talk to him about how he says things and make sure that, because we're all human.
Right. And
bottom line is cops are humans too. We just have a lot more stress and we get to see a lot more garbage on the day to day than everybody else is. So those people that actually pull up next to us at the stoplight and say, hey, thank you so much, or I support you, or you guys, hey, thank you for your service. That goes a long way.
It does.
That's a huge thing because, they may not totally understand. They just maybe see it or whatever, and they're like, I support police, absolutely. But they don't know exactly what it is that we're going through, but they know that we're going through some stress or some struggles.
And I'm such a huge fan of like the public safety academies. I think that if I could give one piece of advice to every single police department in this country is if you don't have a public safety or police
citizen
police academy, start one yesterday. Because when you get, and I do a lot of the teaching with firearms and with the de-escalation stuff, when you get to teach those classes and you get to they go on a ride along with you and you get to kind of explain theoretical concepts in policing, and then they do a ride along, and then you say, hey, remember when I was talking about that? Remember when you saw that? Right. You see it here, and you see this light bulb go on in their head, and it's like, oh my gosh, and these 9 principles, like I said, just if we could get these out there in the public, I think it would go a long way to bridging the gap between, and cops are guilty of the us versus them mentality. It's one of the most detrimental things in law enforcement that you start to develop is that us versus them mentality, because it's not us versus them. According to the Peeling principles, it's us with them.
Well, agreed. Yeah, alongside with them, because we can go through town. Let's say we're walking through town. If we don't have the citizens supporting us, letting us know where things are going or what things are happening, if we don't have people calling it in, between, like we said, if it's small enough town, you have 5 or 6 people, 8 people, police officers, or you have 40 police officers, let's say you have 100 police officers on the beat at a time. One, we can't enforce laws on every single person, and it's 10,000 to 1 sometimes, right?
Nor would anyone want us to.
Right.
That's a totalitarian state that's very detrimental to human life.
But on the other side of it is that with that small number of guys or girls, you're not going to be everywhere also.
No. You have to allocate your time somewhere.
And so we can't go through everybody's neighborhood all the time. We can't always be there to watch your bike. We can't always be there. We depend on you to let us know, hey, this happened. Okay, we're on our way. Right. And we'll go document it or take a report on it, take the photos, do the investigation, whatever, and see if we can find the person that did whatever crime.
And even before that, starting to give them ideas of the trends and the things that are happening so they can prepare themselves to prevent that crime from happening.
Right.
Throw a bike lock on your bike. You live in a high crime neighborhood. You know everything is going to be stolen after dark, so lock up your stuff.
Right. And so lock your cars. Don't park it on whatever street. Right. Turn a light on, or lock your doors in your house. Don't leave your keys in your ignition.
Right.
Which I know some people are like, what? Yeah, there's people that leave their keys in their ignition. I saw a guy one time pull up to 7-Eleven, and there could be any 7-Eleven in any city in the United States because 7-Eleven is 7-Eleven. Nevertheless.
7-Eleven and Walmart, right?
And he pulls up there, and he's got this, his truck is decked out. It's totally lifted, and he pulls right up there. And it's early morning, maybe, 4:30, 5 o'clock.
So there's only 7 drug dealers out instead of 15?
Correct.
Right.
And so he pulls up right there. He leaves his truck running, and this thing's lifted. It's a decked out looking truck. It's nice looking. He gets out of his truck and starts going in the store. I said, hey, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm just going to go get coffee. You're leaving your car running? Yeah, what's wrong with leaving my car running? I always do it. And I said, dude.
Do you have insurance? That's the next question. Do you have
he
insurance?
looks at me, and I happen to know him.
Yeah.
I happen to know this guy, and he's like, he said, all right, is it not a good idea? No, it's 7-Eleven. He goes, but I come here every day. You can't do it, man. It's not, I mean, I guess I'll keep an eye on it, but I'm not always going to be here. But
I was wondering how you got that new truck down there when I drove up.
Yeah,
said, that's a nice truck, Ken.
But no, that's the idea, is that some people don't get it. They don't get it. And they think that it's everywhere they go is the same as their house. It's peaceful and happy and good to go. And it's not. There's people out there. But that's why we need people we need citizens to be out there on the lookout for us and say, hey, there's a weird, suspicious, vehicle. It drove past my house 4 times now.
Right.
I've never seen it in my neighborhood. And I live on a cul-de-sac.
Right.
Way down on the end. So, okay, that's suspicious.
Right.
How come these weird people walk through our bank? What do you mean weird people? I don't know. They're dressed a certain way. They wouldn't take their sunglasses off, and they walk through our bank two times.
Right.
They just walk through the bank? Yeah, at 2 p.m. Yeah, okay. Point them out to us. We would like to go have a talk with them.
Right.
Because that's not normal, everyday stuff. So we need people to be pointing that stuff out to us.
And not only that, but the people, citizens looking out for other citizens. In what I try to tell people is the safest neighborhoods are the ones where you know your neighbors. Mm-hmm. You're familiar with your neighbors. You know who generally comes and goes. You know what cars they drive. And that's something that I think society has gone away from, is those interpersonal groups. And it's been replaced by social media and things like that, where it fosters this illusion of connectedness.
Right.
And I'll give you an example of that. In my neighborhood, I live in a cul-de-sac. I'm not home. My neighbor's home. His garage door's open. He's got a bunch of tools in his garage. This guy, who's very well known to us in the law enforcement world, came to his door, knocks on the door. His wife, my neighbor's wife, came to the door, and he says, hey, is Tiffany here? And to me, I immediately go, I know what he's doing. He's a thief. He's a well-known thief. He's knocking on the door to see if anyone's home. He's got a pre-scripted excuse for why he's there that's very legitimate. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for Tiffany. She cleans houses in this neighborhood was the reason he gave. But he's not. He's seen, is anyone home? Because that garage door's open. It's full of tools.
Right.
So I'm going to knock on the door, give a legitimate excuse if someone's here. And if no one's here, I'm taking all the tools. Right. And so he's got a Ring doorbell, and he sends me this picture of the guy. But my neighbor comes to the door and goes, who are you looking for? Tiffany. Yeah, there's no Tiffany here. There's no Tiffany in that house. There's no Tiffany in that house. There's no Tiffany in that house. And he goes to all the houses, points to all of them, and he goes, yeah, there's no Tiffany's in this neighborhood. You understand what I'm saying, bud? And he's not a cop. He's a normal dude.
A dude, yeah.
But unequivocally telling this guy, I see you, I know you, and I know what you're doing. Right. And so the guy scurries off on his little, he's a 40-something-year-old man that rides a BMX bike around town with a tank top and a backpack full of burglary tools and drugs.
Right.
And so that's an example of, that's a crime prevention that has nothing to do with cops.
Right.
And so knowing your neighborhoods, knowing your communities, and then having a police officer, hopefully, that can intertwine himself into that community and that wealth of information that exists in that community, is a really powerful tool.
Which is where Neighborhood Watch is fantastic with, and things like that.
Yep, absolutely. Same principles. And so that's why, we exist with the cooperation and the favor of the public. And I think that that's something that's indicative of a Portland, of a, Atlanta, of a large city that's experiencing these drastic divisions between law enforcement and the citizens. And certainly on the side of the citizens, it's, in certain communities, it's no, the police are bad. The police are here to harm us. We don't trust the police. We're not going. And I'm not saying that there's nothing the police have done to deserve that, but I don't think that's the rule. I think that there's other forces at play that very unfortunately lend to those types of divisions between the citizens and the police.
Right.
And it's in direct violation of that second principle.
Right. And I think and that wedge gets put in there is because there's no, and I've talked about this before, this is leadership 101, this is humanity 101, but you build relationships.
Yeah.
You have to build relationships.
Yeah.
And if the police aren't building relationships with their citizens and the citizens aren't building relationships with the police, then there's going to be that separation. There's going to be that disparagement. If we maintain that, however, like when I used to be in charge of Neighborhood Watch, I'd go to all these meetings and they say, hey, we've got this thing that happens. And I'd say, oh, well, that's news to me. Well, that's good that it's news to me. They've been dealing with it. They've been handling it.
Right.
And now they're bringing it to me and saying, okay, hey, we have this issue. It's not going away. Okay, let's pop that pimple and figure out how we can address this together so we can have,
right,
peace in your neighborhood or whatever the case may be. And sometimes it works. Sometimes it was a bigger monster than we thought it was. And so, okay, now let's get everybody else involved.
Right.
Make sure the whole department knows that we need to get down into this neighborhood and do a little bit more patrol checks at 2 a.m. or whatever the case may be, and start working this. And then people start saying, hey, the police are here. Hey, it's working what we're doing.
Right.
Okay, so we know that this works. The people aren't coming around checking door handles at 2 a.m. Okay, now we can come. We know that this works both ways. Sure. That relationship is built. And so the next time something comes up, they can do this. Or there's that open communication that's been developed.
Right.
And it was such a huge impact, and I think we have, like you said, gotten away from that, from those bigger things. Everybody's just, I'm going to stay in my own world, and I'm part of the community on Facebook or on whatever social media, as opposed to how many. When was the last time you had a block party?
Right.
And that's a rare thing. And
4th of July, 2022. That was the last time we had a huge party. There was 40 people there.
In your cul-de-sac?
In my cul-de-sac, yeah.
See, I didn't get invited. That's awesome.
Well, there was a height limit on the slide.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think it's kind of funny. You're reading the initial blurb there, and it's talking about the
height limit for
bobbies and the need to be literate. And I was like, well, we're both disqualified, Ken. I can't read, and you're too short.
That's right. That's right. I'm 5'6", so I would have just under the wire. So, well, let's get to number 3. Let's take out number 3. To recognize always that to secure and maintain the respect and approval of the public means also the securing of the willing cooperation of the public in the tasks of securing observance of laws.
That's a lot of words.
That is.
So, again, I think this is obviously each one of these principles kind of builds on the last, and the approval of the public, I think, is largely predicated on the fairness with which the laws are applied. And your ability to be objective about situations and walk into a situation and listen intently to all sides of the story.
Right.
Make an objective decision. Do laws apply here? Do laws not apply here? And leave ego and all of your flaws as a human at the door, and really show the public that neutrality.
Right.
That you are not here to pick a side. You are here to objectively find out what happened, and then overlay that with the laws that might or might not be applicable, and determine if anything needs to happen.
Right. And on the other side of it, I think the people, the citizens, have that understanding that if we say, well, the law says actually this, and that I don't have any authority in whatever the issue is, or actually this is as sharp as my teeth can get on this particular issue. And then they have to be understanding that, okay, that's all you can do. What are my other options? Okay, here's your other options. And we can help them explain. You have a civil litigation that you could do, or there's nothing,
Right.
They have the right to sit out in front of your house and yell at your house from the sidewalk that you smell like liverwurst. I mean, and whatever the case is, that's their freedom of speech. And so this is he's bothering everybody. I know, but he's got freedom of speech to do whatever. And so they start saying, okay, well, I guess that's what the law says.
Right.
And if they don't like it, they have that opportunity to then the redress of grievances to their local politician or their state politician or whomever that can then help make the adjustments to legislation. However, the understanding that these are the lines that we're all drawn into,
right,
and we have to work within these lanes to go with the flow,
right.
And so that's kind of where we sit,
right. And I think that there's another part of this that's, securing the willing cooperation of the public in the task of securing observance of the laws. So, one, that necessitates fair, just laws. First of all, the rules have to be agreed upon by society in order for that to happen. If you have a law that gets passed that, and I'll just use this as an example, here in the state of Oregon, that there was a mandate that came down during COVID that you weren't going to have more than, 6 people in your house during Thanksgiving. And there was this sort of order from the top down. And when I say the top, I mean the top of the state down,
right,
that we were going to be going and knocking on people's doors during Thanksgiving and arresting them out of their homes for having more than 6 people. Well, I myself believed that was fairly unconstitutional.
Correct. I agree.
And I could not think of anything more un-American than going and arresting someone out of their house for willingly inviting people over who willingly came over to have dinner.
Thanksgiving dinner, no less.
Right. And so, it was this kind of sticky situation where, you had to go, no, absolutely not. There's absolutely no way that I'm going to do that. And had I gone and arrested people and gone, instead of, doing, say, DUI enforcement, I had been knocking on doors and checking numbers of people's in houses and arresting them. Mm-hmm. I think I would have lost a lot of cooperation from the public on that.
Right. There's also credibility, and it's capital. It's capital of what it is, whatever capital we have as police officers, we lose that. It's actually the same thing as capital of like leadership capital, or it's the same thing as, the more you spend on something, you're not going to have it now when you need it for something else.
Right.
It's the same as economics 101.
Right. And so we have to do things on a continual and really habitual basis that fosters the cooperation of the public, starting with, we have to have just laws. We have to have just laws, and the laws that we enforce have to be just. Mm-hmm. They cannot grievously, injure someone's ability to make money, to live freely, to live their life the way they want.
Right.
We can't interfere with those things. So we as a society, first and foremost, have to agree on the rules of the game, and then we have to conduct ourselves on a continual and habitual basis in a way that fosters a willingness to cooperate with the laws, because that's the best situation, right? That's the best situation, is that first and foremost, each individual person in society governs their own behavior and regulates their own behavior in accordance with the laws. That's what's best for everyone.
Right.
The best thing is not for the police to be arresting people. The best thing is not for us to come in and have to use force against a person who's now going to go tell everyone they know how they were unlawfully beat up by the cops and sow those seeds of discord. The best thing is for that person never to commit a crime and play in accordance to the rules.
Right.
The next best thing is for us to step in and remind them, hey, these are the laws, these is what's going on. And maybe it's just a warning for a traffic violation. Maybe it's one night in county jail because, you stole a $10, item from whatever store,
right.
And then the worst case scenario is this person is trying to injure or kill someone and we have to use deadly force against them, right? Mm-hmm. That's the worst case scenario for us.
Right.
Because it's going to, like you said, if we haven't stored up that capital and that trust, that can be a very, very detrimental and dividing type of incident.
Right. I don't think we we remember that sometimes, and as citizens is what I'm talking about, that because I mean we're all citizens as it is,
Yep.
but I think we don't look at that sometimes as if we're busy doing one thing, are we not able to do something else? And I had somebody ask me one time, and it was another officer, and he said, and this is when they were talking about, hey, if the Second Amendment gets repealed, are you going to go, if they tell you, hey, you need to go start knocking on doors and collecting guns or whatever? And I'm like, first off, Second Amendment's not getting repealed while I'm still alive.
Right.
Second off is no. And when I was a younger guy, younger officer, and all this different stuff, I was like, I'm going to do whatever they tell me to do. I love my job. I'm a go-getter and blah, blah, blah. And you get a little bit, bit longer in this job and you're like, well, right and wrong and all this stuff like that. Initially I was like, well, I got to do what they say to do. Right. But on the other side of it, I'm like, well, wait a minute. No. So now as I look at it now, I'm not going to somebody's door and asking for their rifles. Or for
Do you know how
guns.
much harder this job would be if the citizens didn't have guns?
Oh yeah.
Seriously, the threat of citizen on citizen violence, righteous citizen on citizen violence, especially in the town that I work, is the primary thing that prevents the citizens from getting burglarized and their houses broken into. I mean, the number of times that a sort of normal law-abiding citizen has been grievously victimized in this town, I probably can count on one hand in my mid-range career.
Right.
Most of the violence, serious violence that we see is drug dealers on drug dealers or marijuana growers on marijuana growers that are operating way outside the rules and the laws, and so I think that those laws have to be fair and they have to be just, and they certainly can't trump someone's God-given rights that this country allows.
Right. That's that, like you were saying, what I was thinking was, somebody is trying to break in or whatever, and somebody just racks a shotgun inside their house.
Right.
That person trying to get in goes away.
Right.
That just disappears.
Right.
And they didn't point the gun at anybody. They didn't do anything they shouldn't have done. They racked a shotgun inside their house. Whether the sound of it was whatever it was, or they did it, or they actually saw something. Or a
verbal warning, I'm armed, don't come in here.
Right. I mean, how many, and I mean, where we live, it is you can strap a 6-shooter to your leg and walk down the street. No big deal. You can be John Wayne.
Yep.
And so people do that quite frequently. You'll see people walking around with guns and holsters at the grocery store and wherever. I don't know if there's a direct correlation. However, you don't see a lot of, those guys aren't pulling their guns out.
No.
To shoot anybody.
No. Just
because a gun's there doesn't mean it gets used.
Right.
But because a gun's there, it makes somebody think twice about using theirs if they're armed. So that idea that more crime gets, or there's more, honestly, I don't know where I was going with it. Nevertheless, it is, you have more of an opportunity to keep yourself safe knowing that there's guns available to you.
Yeah.
And so, now if you take that on the adverse side where there's no guns, people I can go do whatever I want. There's nothing anybody's going to do to stop me.
Right. You get those big cities.
Right.
The big cities where they pass laws that prevent you from carrying a gun anywhere.
And that's where the most shootings are at.
Right.
So, but we need these things to be able to have people observe that the laws are there and that they're willing to cooperate with those, that public task of making sure that these are the laws that we need to have in place, and they get it, they understand it. That percentage don't get it. What, 10%, maybe 15% don't get that these laws are here for a reason, to keep everybody else safe. And some people, like we said, don't understand that whole side of it.
Right.
And some do.
Right.
So number 4, to recognize always that the extent to which the cooperation of the public can be secured diminishes proportionately the necessity of the use of physical force and compulsion for achieving police objectives.
And I think that that's a lot of words to say. Essentially, the more the citizens believe in what we're doing, the less force will have to be used.
Yeah.
It's, I think that kind of on face value makes sense in a lot of ways, but it's something that's also come under fire recently that, especially with the advent of body cameras. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're a martial artist, you can do all your forms and you can practice and have perfect form. When you get into a fight, it's ugly. It's not pretty. It's not a perfect form.
Right.
It's not this abject minimal amount of force used to subdue this person. It's ugly. I mean, it's violent. It's not predictable.
It's not like you see in the movies where it's exact movements or you see, let's take a knife fight, for instance. You are guaranteed, I will say you are guaranteed, if somebody has a knife, you will be cut.
You're getting cut. Yep.
Guaranteed. You're not going to be like in the movies where it's going to be like, and
you kick it out of their hand.
And I got it. No, you are getting cut. There will be blood spilled because that is 100% fact. Now, is it going to be super deep? Is it going to be really bad? I can't tell you that. However, I can tell you, I guarantee you will get cut.
Right.
They may even get cut.
Right.
The person wielding the knife.
Right.
But that's the idea, is that you practice all these things. You might practice over and over and over, or you see in the movies, this thing happens, and they got away without a scratch, and everything was great. That's not real life.
No.
And what I train is what I think about, and this is everything from whatever martial art I train in, or in defensive tactics or anything else like that. 100% of what I practice and train is not going to be there. I'm going to maybe use 30% of that when it gets into
the adrenaline is a serious de-evolution of your trained skills. It induces a serious de-evolution of your trained skills, that adrenaline dump. And it's, I think that with body cameras, and I'm a huge supporter of body cameras. I think they are one of the greatest tools for law enforcement that has come about lately. But that's also one of the things that we've seen is, 55 million law enforcement citizen contacts a year on average in the United States. That's a nation of roughly 300 million people, right? 55 million law enforcement citizen contacts a year. Show me a job where there's 55 million actions taken and all of them go perfectly and all of them go without incident and without someone getting irritated or angry, much less add all of the conditions which law enforcement are contacting citizens. Generally, it's not like, hey, we called you here because, we're having a birthday party and we just thought it'd be neat to have you here. It's, we're having a birthday party and Uncle Larry got too drunk and punched Uncle Timmy in the face. And now we need you to fix this birthday party that just got ruined. Right.
Right.
And so you have these conditions that are just the perfect storm of, anybody can go through and sift through and find all of the worst of those contacts. And I'm not making any excuses for bad behavior by law enforcement by any means whatsoever. But then you add the uses of force to that, which is, going to be roughly 0.003%. There's going to be some type of a use of force, or 0.03%. I gotta get my numbers correct here. Do you think that all of those are going to look pretty and look perfect and everyone's going to act exactly how you'd want them to act in training and et cetera? Right. Absolutely not. And so, you have this new technology that's been integrated that allows the public to see what a fight actually looks like, what a real street fight looks like.
Right.
When you don't know what that person's armed with, when you don't know, what they're doing. And I'll give you a perfect example of a psychological kind of switch that I think is really important. And this is something that I try to drill into new officers any chance I get. That person ran from you, right? Yep, he ran from me. Why did he run from you? He's trying to get away. Was he? He was trying to get away. That was his objective. You know that? He ran from me. He was trying to get away. He was trying to run away from me. He was trying to, okay. I disagree. And the way I explain foot pursuits to new officers is that person was going from a position of disadvantage and seeking a position of advantage. That's all they were doing. And as you chased them, you went from a position of advantage to a position of disadvantage.
Right.
Right. And the more complicated that foot pursuit gets, the more times you lose sight of that person, the higher advantage goes to him.
Right.
And we saw just in, I think it was North Carolina, there was a shooting where a 14-year-old kid was running from a police officer and then suddenly turns around, points a gun, shoots the police officer in the shoulder, and the police officer had to return fire. And so you get into these situations where it's like, oh, well, he was running from the cops. He was just trying to get away, and that might be the public perception. And one thing that I just have to drill even into new officers is maybe they were running to get away, but maybe they were just seeking a position of advantage to launch an attack from. And so that kind of changes the perception on how and that's something I say in the Citizen Police Academy, and that's a big change for people. That's a big difference in thought process.
Right.
Right. And that's why people can get shot in the back, is because if the crimes that they've committed, if they're posing a threat to the public, if they are running, if they are doing, several things, they can be shot in the back. Now, that's not pretty, and we might see it on body camera. We might dislike seeing it, but that doesn't mean that it's unlawful. And that's why it's so important that we try to avoid those types of scenarios. We try to avoid the situations that are likely to yield a violent encounter. And that's kind of what this principle is talking about, is the more we can do to secure the cooperation of the public, the less violence we will have to use in observance of the laws.
Right.
And the more violence we use in observance of the laws, likely the less cooperation we're going to get.
Right. It's the same thing with, the harder you are on your kids, the more you're coming down on them all the time, and they're going to start rebelling.
Right.
As they start getting older, because they're like, this is going to happen either way, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to enjoy it, or whatever the case may be. I'm going to go back on what we were just talking about. There was a guy that the police were chasing, and he had crashed into. Actually, one of our officers was going to throw spike strips across the road, and he saw the officer over by his car, and he veered off the roadway, knowing what he was there. He didn't even see the spike strips, just saw the officer, and went directly at him. And he was in a position of advantage. He was doing spike strips the way he was supposed to. Sure. And so
for those that don't know, that means you are throwing a device to disable the tires of the car, and he was doing it from a position where the car couldn't strike him. He behind a big tree or a barricade or something like that. That's
right. Nevertheless, when he threw him, the guy still veered, goes around that barricade, that thing that he had, and was aiming directly for that police officer. That guy had to dove into a ditch, and the guy goes off the roadway and gets back on the roadway and takes off down the road. They catch him later, and they said, and much later, he got away at that time, but they caught him much later, and they said, "Hey, what was the deal with that whole thing, And he goes, well, I knew that if I were to take him out and I were to run him over, all of you guys would have stopped and focused on dealing with him, and you wouldn't be dealing with me anymore. You wouldn't be chasing me." He was taking that disadvantage that he had, and he was trying to take that advantage by having us all stop and deal with him, the injured officer or whatever the case may be, and then he would be able to get away. That separates the time in that we're actively chasing him.
Right.
He's no longer, he knows that he's scot-free, and that we are not, he has that advantage now over us. Right. Now he can go commit more crimes, or he can go come back and try to hurt us again.
Right.
Especially if we are dealing with the scene or whatever, and we're all now focused, our head down, trying to lend aid to our brother or whatever, and he comes back, and now he can get four of us who are all leaning over a body at this time. And it's the same reason that you'll see, police chases, and these guys are just blowing red lights. Yeah, they're trying to get away. But if they can cause any kind of damage on the way, or they can crash, make two cars crash,
or the threat of damage.
Exactly.
Threat of damage is there as well.
Yeah, because if they're sitting there able to do that, then hey, I'm gonna get away any way I can. And I know what you guys are going to do is focus on, if people are hurt, you're going to stop and start dealing with them.
Right. Yep.
I mean, we had a guy doing that. He was driving all over town, just crashing into stuff, caused like 5 different crashes. And then his whole thing was he thought he said that the devil was chasing him. So he saw us as the devil. I mean, obviously he had some mental issues,
sure,
whether it was drugs, mental, or a combination of, I don't know. But he ultimately ended up crashing, and just, there was a whole drag him out of the car and a lot of, tire smoke and the whole deal. But he caused like 3 or 4 crashes along the way. So everybody
right,
that was initially chasing him and was now stopping and dealing with this, with their individual crashes that they had to deal with. So, but that's that idea that those people are, if people understand that we have these rules that we have to kind of get into, maintain them, that if we have the public cooperating with us, helping us out, we don't have to do as much. If we just say, hey, can we do this? And it's not, you will do this, because that comes down to martial law. So it comes down to, jackbooted thugs like you were talking about. But people understand, hey, the law says this.
Right.
I don't go, I might be able to go 74 in a 65 or whatever.
Right.
But I'm not going 102.
Right.
There's a
right. And then when you do have to use force, like you said, hopefully you've built up enough capital with the rest of the community, and they understand, well, wait a minute, hold on. I've conducted myself as a responsible citizen. I've observed the laws. This person stepped out of line. And then not only that, they tried to hurt someone, or they tried to hurt that officer. Yeah, no kidding. The officer had to use force. I'm good with it. And that's the ultimate goal, is that, A, we don't use force because each citizen is observing the laws, and they recognize that it's best for society, it's best for their community, it's best for their neighborhood, it's best for their home, it's best for their family, for them to act in accordance with the laws and do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And then when someone is in that, crisis, or they're having that, mental episode or whatever, and there is some level of force used, the rest of society goes, I understand why.
Right. And there's a good thing where I know some supervisors have gone and talked to people after. Did you see what happened? Yeah. Well, I was watching. He was doing this, and the officer was doing this, and blah blah blah. Do you think the officer was out of line? No way. That guy was crazy, and he was trying to attack. Okay.
Yeah. There was of all places I know is going to shock you. It was Walmart. The Walmart. The Walmart. That's where most of the stories start. But a guy had done a home invasion. Burglary with the firearm, and we had video of that incident. And then he had left his backpack at Walmart with a firearm with all of the stolen
stuff from
merchandise from the house.
Right.
And so we showed up, and he was going to go back to prison. He knew that. We knew that. And when we showed up, he ran, and a use of force ensued, and there was punches thrown. It was ugly, and it was a righteous use of force to take this guy into custody, because he was fighting to not go back to prison, and we were fighting to prevent him from accessing another firearm or whatever, and he didn't end up having another firearm, but you don't know that in the moment.
Right.
And so we get in this use of force and everything. And then there was a couple citizens that had seen what happened. And this was kind of in the midst of a lot of the riots and things like that. So there was just kind of a sentiment in the air of distrust towards the police nationwide.
Right.
Right. And so these guys start yelling, and we're talking a nationwide extraditable felony warrant for escaping from the Department of Corrections, a home invasion with a firearm for a guy that has a long history of forcibly robbing people with firearms. And
now he's actively fighting the
police. With unknown other people involved that, in a public place in the middle of a parking lot. You don't get much worse than that. Maybe, active assailant type situations, but you don't get much worse than that as far as potential for things to go wrong.
And that we need to get this guy.
We need to get him in controlled. And so he uses force. And so these citizens watch, and they say, we're going to file a complaint on that officer. Me personally, We're going to file a complaint on that officer for, he was punching that guy and, doing all this stuff. And so they come into the police department the next day, and they came in, they had a conversation with one of the officers, and the conclusion they came to was, Yeah, we didn't really have all the facts. We didn't know what was actually going on. We don't really want to complain anymore because now we have information.
Right.
Sure. And so it's that it ended up being okay in that situation, but hopefully we can build up enough capital and trust with the community that complaint never starts, or they understand that there might be more than what's on the surface there.
Right. So we have 5 more principles, and we've just gotten into 4, and we obviously are digging into this fairly deep, and I'm loving this conversation, but I know that your time is limited, and so what I'm going to do is I say let's go ahead and we're going to table this for now, and we can bring this back up on another on a subsequent episode at some point. But I think this is a fantastic conversation. It's great, and I think a lot of people are getting some light shed on certain aspects of policing. And so what do you say we bring you back for another episode at some point, and we continue this conversation at a later date? Are you good with that?
I think that sounds great.
Cool. Because I know you got some stuff to do. I've got some stuff to do. But I don't want people to go away thinking that, well, we only do half the thing and we're not going to. No, we will come back to this. This will be, and I will bring Officer Brooks back, and we'll continue this conversation in the future. But I do want to make sure that we cover these topics because it's good stuff. I mean, this is good stuff. I really enjoy this.
Foundational, I would say.
Oh, agreed. So speaking of foundation, that's the bottom of everything, right? Have you ever heard of the boot brand of Hikes? HAIX.
I haven't. Tell me about it.
So they're a boot brand, and they have actually they got a hold of me and they asked me if I would want to try a pair of their boots and say, hey, wear these to work, walk in them, do everything for you would at work, and tell us what you think. And I said, cool. So they sent me a pair of boots. I've been wearing them. The first couple of days, obviously, with any new pair of shoes, you have to get used to them. But I've been wearing them. They're kind of more of an athletic shoe boot. They're really comfortable, and the quality is good. I would recommend wearing those boots, or at least giving them a try. So if you have an opportunity, check out Hikes. They're cool.
There you go.
And maybe I'll put a picture of them up or whatever. But they're durable. The ones I got they kind of have a good Gore-Tex waterproofness to them, so they're solid. I dig them.
That's good. It gets wet here, so
that's true.
A good warm boot is foundational, as you said, to any job that you stand on your feet.
That's right. Also, I know that you're all about fitness, right? I know you've heard of Ethos. I had Colonel Jeff Crapo on here previously, and he runs a company called Ethos. But another company called A Dose of Ethos, which is run by a deputy out of California named Jarrett Morris, and he has this company. And what they do is they will develop. They have fitness programs, meal plans, all that stuff like that for folks get ready to go into the academy, and then officers who are more veteran who spend their day in a vehicle, get out of a vehicle, and it's workouts designed for the police officer.
Yeah,
and so he's got clothing, he's got a whole workout program, and so what they'll do is they'll get you a whole workout program based off of your needs and where you're at in your career.
Right.
But they will also give you 10% off of their services if you enter the code word "What's a Hero" when you order your stuff.
Nice.
And not just you, but if you're listening, you too. So anybody that puts
that means you. Yes, you.
That's right. So you're welcome to try those guys out. Check them out. Dose of Ethos, DOSE of ETHOS. Dose of Ethos. Just Google it. It'll pop right back up, and the information that you need will be right there. Use code What's a Hero on checkout, and you'll get 10% off all your stuff. So, I do want to say, if you want to find out more about the What's a Hero podcast, you can get a hold of us on every social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. You can get us on, is there another one? I'm not on Chapsnat or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm not a social media guy, so I can't help you there.
Right. So, but you can get a hold of us on all those guys. You can also find us on the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com, and you find all of our previous episodes, links to your favorite podcast platform, and that will take you to there. Let's say it's iTunes or whatever, or Apple Podcasts, and you download it, or you become a subscriber. Download it. It helps us with some numbers, and it's good for everybody else to just be able to have a good podcast readily available for you to listen to, especially if you're on a long trip or you got to go on a flight or something like that, and you have that readily going for you. So hit us up. Officer Brooks, you have any final words you want to leave everybody before we take off today, and then try to come back at another point? Yeah, just I want to kind of leave with what we started with, which is your why. Continually develop that, especially if you're looking to go into law enforcement, firefighting, being an EMT, military, anything where you're going to encounter chaos and where you're going to encounter depravity and violence or anything that's going to cause you to veer off. Is develop your why. Constantly work on yourself, build yourself up physically, mentally, spiritually, ethically, and continue to work on that and understand why you're doing what you're doing. It's foundational to who you are, and it will make you better at your job. It'll make you better as a family man, as a parent, as a brother, sister, son, daughter. Develop that why. Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic way to go out. And so that just, like he was mentioning, you know what, to our firefighters and EMT brothers out there, thank you so much for everything you do. Our veterans, you guys that are overseas doing all this stuff for everybody else, thank you so much. And nurses, teachers, thank you for sacrificing your time and your skills for other people. And that's where we as a society continue to thrive and grow, because people like you are willing to do that. And to our law enforcement brothers out there, keep your chin up. Understand, know your principles, know your foundation, know your why, and know that we have your back. We support you, and we appreciate everything you do, because you keep us being the country in which we are right now, the society and the communities that we have, because you are willing to leave your house every day to support other people. So thank you, and we appreciate you more than you know. So for Officer Brooks, I've been Ken Frownfelter, and this has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.